BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. First, I would like to begin with a couple of quick announcements. A big thank you to everybody who listened to last Wednesday's episode on the Long Island serial killer. I started a series of videos last year about the list, and I decided to continue with them because something just felt like it hadn't been completed. And I also wanted to examine all of the stories of the victims and the theories and everything under the sun and in the darkness about the Long Island serial killer. There's definitely a lot of ground to cover in that mystery. So the Wednesday segment will be devoted to the Long Island serial killer for the foreseeable future. And if you're listening to this at some time well beyond that, I invite you to check out any of the episodes about the Long Island serial killer, the Zodiac, or any of the other true crime episodes here on this channel, covering every subject under the sun and in the darkness. But I would also invite you guys to tune in every Friday for the Anything Goes segment, where any subject is fair game. Last Friday I was talking about Charles Manson, and one of the first times that I truly covered some of the material from the trials involved with Manson, as well as some of the other members of his quote-unquote family, Tex Watson, Leslie Van Houten, and Susan Atkins, and everything surrounding the Tate LaBianca murders. So if you're curious about these cases, once again, you can subscribe to the channel, and weigh in the comments section down below, and perhaps some of your questions and comments will be featured in future episodes. And a genuine piece of Zodiac news to share with you is that I did an episode on Drew Beeson's channel called just that, Drew Beeson. He is the author of Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer, as well as the creator of the Zodcast here on YouTube. And we were talking all about the Zodiac, so I would invite you to check out not only that interview and discussion with me, but also look at any of his content about the Zodiac Killer, and just the same as this one, weigh in the comments section down below, participate, and perhaps it'll lead one thing to another, and some ideas will be connected. That's one of the true values of having the comment sections available for people, so we can just talk about this stuff, and maybe your comments will be featured in an episode. Now, I would also like to give a big thank you to Michael Morford, who wrote in saying that he is going to touch base with me about some of the comments that were shared in a recent episode about the Zodiac Killer suspect, McDuff. And I will definitely look forward to discussing that with him in the near future, as well as looking at some of his material in this episode. But much like the last Zodiac Killer news reports, I would like to begin with a challenge question for you guys, something a little bit unrelated from the true crime world. And I just saw this in the comment section on somebody else's channel. It was a question that was posed, and it was, how do you deal with people who mistreat you deliberately? That was the question. How do you deal with people who mistreat you deliberately? And I think this is referring to someone who is trying to be conventionally mean, taking advantage of other people, or to provide the context, it was left on an episode talking about workplace situations. So that is kind of what is referring to as opposed to familial disputes or even things among friends. But I think it definitely should apply to friendships. And when it was read off on the program, the host of that other show said, "Do not resent them and do not get angry with them." How do you deal with people who mistreat you? Do not resent them and do not get angry with them. And Dr. Daniel Amen says something very similar in one of his books when he was writing about the story of a boy who was bullied. And he said that boy, that is, that as soon as he stopped getting angry about it, people stopped bullying him. And, I mean, some people think that that is a practical solution. How do you deal with people who mistreat you deliberately? Don't resent them and don't get angry. But to me, that sounded like after the fact. And instead, I would propose something about stopping the problem before it starts, because here on Black Box Online Radio, I once did an episode called "What is a Toxic Personality?" And in that episode, I read off something that was written out on a forum. I don't even remember where I found it, but the person said there are two major characteristics that attract toxic personalities, and that is when a person is too warm and sunny and they are a good listener. And maybe that's three things, but warm and sunny almost kind of go all together into one. Warm and sunny and a good listener. And I think anybody who has been in a toxic relationship will understand exactly what that means. I know it's not the clearest definition of a personality type, but warm and sunny and a good listener. So what is the response? How do you deal with people who mistreat you deliberately? I would scale it back on both of those things. I know it's tempting. I know it's tempting to just be all light and airy all of the time and just act like there isn't a problem, but maybe show a little bit more awareness. Be suspicious of people, especially when you know that they're mistreating you or exhibiting behaviors that you do not like. This is even a self-help activity that I read about once when they said, write down the list of behaviors that you find acceptable, or maybe even the list of behaviors that you appreciate rather than acceptable, but definitely in the other column, write down the list of behaviors that are unacceptable. And when someone doesn't do one of those behaviors or they start doing the unacceptable behaviors, distance yourself from that person or cut them out. Or if they're coworkers, like what that other person was asking about, only talk to them about work-related issues. Do not make any small talk. Do not make eye contact with them if you don't have to. Why are you engaging with this person if you don't need to? And just as that person asked the question, this person's mistreating you deliberately, well, reduce your interactions. Stop the problem before it starts. And be aware of the surroundings, because it shouldn't be only about running away from something. It should also be about watching your own behavior so you do not attract those types of people that are going to mistreat you in the first place. So that's my response to the question, how do you deal with people who mistreat you deliberately? And if anybody would like to answer that challenge question, you can put your responses down below. And also, there have been two attempts from somebody named The Bible Group, that's the YouTube username, for me to respond to a question about what was I like back in high school. And if you look at the timestamps, you'll find the answer to that question at the end of this episode. So the Bible Group asked that twice about some of my awkward behavior from high school. I will respond to that later on. But here and now, I wanted to talk about some claims that were in the book. The Criminology podcast presents the case of the Zodiac killer. And I need to give an introduction that this is something that was created by Mike Morford and Michael Ferguson. And I am also the host of the Zodiac Killer channel's Interview with the Experts series. And the producers of that program approached me once and they said, how would you feel about interviewing Michael Ferguson, the man who co-hosted the criminology podcast with Mike Morford, and thus in turn is the author of the book, The Criminology Podcast Presents the Case of the Zodiac Killer. And I said, absolutely, that would be a great idea. I will talk to almost anybody who has a major publication out about the Zodiac Killer. Maybe there'll be a few exceptions, but practically anyone is welcome on that show if they have a book out there. And yes, I would like to discuss that with them. And I pulled up a free sample of their book off of Amazon.com. Anybody can do that if you have an electronic device. And as I was reading through this, I found that there were some challenge questions of their own right that were shared with the reader. And the first one comes from Michael Ferguson, and I really appreciate his skepticism and his ability to question things, because the Zodiac Killer was a serial killer that operated in California in the 1960s. The first confirmed Zodiac crime occurred on December 20th of 1968 with the Lake Herman Road murders. Then the Zodiac just goes cold for the winter, excuse the terrible expression, and also cold for the spring. The Zodiac doesn't officially operate again until the summer of 1969 with the murder of Darlene Ferrin and the shooting of Mike Michaud on July 4th of 1969, Blue Rock Springs Park, and then Darlene Ferrin passes away at 12:38 a.m. on July 5th, and the Zodiac makes the first phone call at 12:40 a.m. on July 5th as well, and it's possible that that's just a coincidence, that the phone call and the death of Darlene were only 2 minutes apart. Other people think that it was deliberate and somebody knew exactly what was going on, and people are communicating and lots of people are in cahoots together. Well, anyway, the Zodiac Killer would not only make a phone call taking credit for the crime, he would also mail in a letter and a cipher, and the cipher is divided into 3 parts, which goes on to be known as the 408 cipher. But in the first letter, the Zodiac Killer is trying to taunt the police, and he's saying that he is the killer of the 2 teenagers at Lake Herman last Christmas and the girl on the 4th of July, and he's going to state some facts that only he and the police knows. That only he and the police know, right? And Michael Ferguson made the very strong question, how do we know this person was actually the killer? Is there not some other way that somebody could have obtained this information? And lots of people have thought of that. Someone could have had access to police reports about Lake Herman Road as well as Blue Rock Springs, and maybe even certain details could have been pulled up from the paper. I definitely appreciate that type of skepticism, but I think that both Morph and Michael Ferguson were on the same page about how, yes, those are confirmed Zodiac crimes, but what would be an example of this? Well, in a future episode of the Zodiac Killer's Interview with the Experts series, I will be talking to Druzer, who has shared a lot with this channel as well, BBOR, and an example that he points out is that Mike Michaud, the surviving victim from the Blue Rock Springs shooting, was shot in the knee, but the police report said that he was shot in the lower leg, and the Zodiac stated indeed that Mike Michaud was shot in the knee, meaning that he had been there and he had witnessed it. But I think that a very odd time when it comes to this whole police report theory is that Darlene Ferrin was the female victim at Blue Rock Springs Park, and she was wearing something that was called a slack dress. When the Zodiac approached their car, Mike Michaud was in the passenger seat, Darlene Ferrin was in the driver's seat. And some channels like the Infographics show really got that all backwards, and I don't know if it was that video that swayed me the wrong way. For the longest time, I mean, we're talking like years when I first started learning about this stuff, I thought that Mike Michaud had been in the driver's seat and Darlene had been in the passenger seat and the Zodiac approached the driver's side of the car. And when I say years, well, that goes to show you that, yeah, you get caught up reading about the details of the suspects and you don't necessarily get to the heart and soul of the issue and actually start looking at the facts of the case immediately. I definitely didn't do that anyway. But Mike Mageau's in the passenger seat. Darlene Ferrin is in the driver's seat. The Zodiac has a flashlight, but does he actually get a good look at what Darlene Ferrin is wearing? Because in the letter it says the girl was wearing patterned slacks, and she wasn't wearing slacks, she was wearing a slack dress. Now, did somebody read the police report and simply not know what a slack dress was, and thought that that was just an odd way of writing dress slacks? Or did the Zodiac get a look at Darlene Ferrin and see that, okay, it seems like she's wearing patterned slacks? Bear in mind that it's pitch black at night. The shooting probably occurred somewhere between 11:50 p.m. on July 4th and 12 midnight. Did he just look in and see the pattern and was like, okay, she has something on her clothes that looks like a pattern, and yeah, they have pant legs, so yeah, she's wearing patterned slacks. Is that just what happened? Well, it's important to remember that the slack dress is a one-piece jumpsuit that has pant legs that form into a bell bottom, so maybe, I mean, to be honest, it's an unsolved case. We don't really know what the person was thinking, but it's interesting to question this stuff from the beginning. Now, the second point that I found, just reading this little sample of the book by Mike Ferguson and Mike Morford, as I said, you can get this off of Amazon.com. The next challenge question is, in the Zodiac Killer's 408 cipher, it talks about, I like hunting, I like killing people, because it is so much fun. It is even more fun than hunting wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. And then the Zodiac goes on to say that, when I die I will be reborn in paradise, and those whom I have killed will be my slaves. The question is, I think this one's also posed by Michael Ferguson, is, did the Zodiac Killer actually believe that? That when he died he was going to be reborn in paradise, and those who he had killed will be his slaves? When I first read that, I thought, absolutely not. I thought that this was just some guy trying to be weird, trying to be scary, trying to fool people, and I don't necessarily know 100%. When I watched the 1971 film The Zodiac Killer, which I saw on Tom Voigt's YouTube channel, that was several years ago, that one featured a killer who actually believed it, and it shows a dramatization of what that would look like if this guy is actually trying to murder people so that they will be his slaves in paradise. And he was even dealing with some type of delusion, because even though he is still alive, he's communicating with them, and in his own mind, rather. He was doing like a meditative ritual when he's talking to the dead people and their spirits beyond. Did the Zodiac Killer actually believe that he was going to get slaves in the afterlife? Well, Dr. Todd Grande responded to this in his video about the Zodiac Killer by saying, either the Zodiac is delusional, or he wants people to think that he is delusional. Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, also addressed this point with the 408 cipher, saying, this could have been the foundation of an insanity defense. If the Zodiac were indeed caught, then he could just say that he was out of his mind and he was not sane, not fit to stand trial. So both of those sound like they're in the no category, that this person is putting on an act because he wants to fool people for some reason. And I believe it was Jacob Wilbers who sent in this question to the show The Bible Geek. What do you make of this? Slaves in the afterlife, is this connected to any real religion? And the host of the Bible Geek show said that this is something that is reminiscent of the Egyptian pharaohs, that this was a belief that the pharaoh could be reborn in the afterlife and he would have slaves with him. So is the Zodiac trying to act like a pharaoh? And definitely an arrogant thing to say, but the Zodiac did frequently talk about that, and I still have to vote no. This person did not actually believe it. I think that, again, this is just something that's trying to be creepy, confusing, and deranged. Because one thing that is very common with serial killers is they try to make you think that they are very weird, very bizarre, but also very dangerous. And that weird, bizarre nature creates a chaotic effect. And it's not only serial killers, murderers, mass shooters. You'll hear these descriptions about them all the time. Oh, it's like that guy was just trying to be as weird as possible. It's like that guy was intentionally trying to be creepy. You will hear that all the time. And there are several reasons for this, but I think the biggest one is that by being confusing and by being creepy, this person thinks that he will gain power over other people's emotions. But I have no idea what the Zodiac was actually thinking when he wrote that out, or whoever created the ciphers, what their exact thought process was. Just throwing out a few guesses. But one final point that is shared from this section of the book, the Criminology Podcast presents the case of the Zodiac Killer. Again, these are the transcripts of their podcast, is a recommendation. And Morph and Michael Ferguson say that the Zodiac Killer wrote a letter on August 4th of 1969, or simply referred to as the August 1969 letter. Did I say it was written on August 4th? No, I take that back. The August 1969 letter. And August 4th is the publication date. Please don't chew my head off for that one. But they said with the August 1969 letter, you need to read that in its entirety. And I will do just that now. And this August 4th letter is the first time that the Zodiac says his name, because in the letter that was mailed after the Blue Rock Springs shooting, there is not a usage of the word Zodiac. But the full text is, Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking. In answer to your asking for more details about the good times I have had in Vallejo, I shall be very happy to supply even more material. By the way, are the police having a good time with the code? If not, tell them to cheer up. When they do crack it, they will have me. On the 4th of July, I did not open the car door. The window was rolled down already. The boy was originally sitting in the front seat when I began firing. When I fired the first shot at his head, he leapt forward. Blech, epic failure on my part. He leapt backwards at the same time, thus spoiling my aim. He ended up in the back seat, then the floor, in the back, thrashing very violently with his legs. That's how I shot him in the knee. I did not leave the scene of the killing with squealing tires and a racing engine, as described in the Vallejo paper. I drove away quite slowly as to not draw attention to my car. The policeman who told me... Epic failure number 2. The man who told the police that my car was brown was a Negro, about 40 to 45, rather shabbily dressed. I was in the phone booth having some fun with the Vallejo cop when he was walking by. When I hung the phone up, the damn XAT thing began to ring, and that drew attention to me in my car. Last Christmas, in that episode, the police were wondering how I could shoot and hit my victims in the dark. They did not openly state this, but they implied by saying that it was a well-lit night, and I could see silhouettes on the horizon. Bullshit. That area is surrounded by high hills and trees. What I did was tape a small pencil flashlight to the barrel of my gun. If you notice in the center of the beam of light, if you aim at it, at a wall or a ceiling, you will see a black or dark spot in the center of the circle of light, about 3 to 6 inches across. When taped to the gun barrel, the bullet will strike in the center of the black dot in the light. All I had to do was spray them as if I was using a water hose. There was no need to use the gun sights. I was not happy to see that I did not get front page coverage. And those are the words of the Zodiac Killer. I do have to note that when I was reading this section in the book from the Criminology Podcast, they had one point here where this is a transcript. This is something that was recorded and then it has been transcribed. So one of the sentences blended into the next line, and it said, if not, tell them to cheer up. When they crack it, they will have me on the 4th of July. All of that ran together, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's it. All of those things about a multiple killers theory are true, because this means there's only a single killer for the 4th of July, but there were other killers at the other crime scenes. When they crack it, they will have me on the 4th of July. No, but those are two different sentences. Very clearly it says, if not, tell them to cheer up, semicolon. When they do crack it, comma, they will have me, period. On the 4th of July, I did not open the car door. So that is another point there that suggests a single perpetrator. Do you have any responses to hearing that Zodiac letter in its entirety, minus one or two misspeakings on my part, excuse me again? I think that this is someone who's going to great lengths to show that he actually committed the crime, and Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCiphers.com has talked about this perhaps more loudly than anyone by saying, the Zodiac did just that. He was begging people to see that he committed the Lake Herman Road murders, or the Blue Rock Springs shooting, the murder of Darlene Ferrin. I mean, 2 letters, one at the end of July and one at the beginning of August, begging people to see how and I guess to a certain extent, why he committed these crimes. How, he gives us all these details. Why, he says that he wants slaves in the afterlife. But with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966, where is this type of material? The Domingos Edwards murders in 1963, the Swindle murders in 1964, the murder of Ray Davis in 1962. If this person is a prolific serial killer who had been operating in California all the way back to 1962, where is the evidence of that? I mean, why isn't this person able to say, oh, you stumbled upon my Riverside activity, but you're only getting the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there. For example, when I killed Sherry Jo Bates, I did all of this. And, it's also interesting to point out, I believe it was Classic Chevy Cat who said this in the comments section. After Sherry Jo Bates was murdered in 1966, you have multiple pieces of writing that are sent in that address her by name, but the Zodiac's letters do not do that. They don't say something like Miss Farron or Mr. Michaud. They just talk to them about them as the boy, the girl. At Lake Herman Road, they're also just referred to as the boy and the girl. That is a very different sense of writing style, because in the Riverside confession after the Bates murder, you get stuff such as, Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. And there was a very dramatic reading of that on Planet X Filmworks in the episode about the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, which I will get to in just a second. But I definitely will invite you to watch the episode that Ross did on Planet X Filmworks. Some very detailed stuff there. But the final point from the Criminology podcast book is that there was a claim that they were trying to make, and that is that the Criminology podcast presents the Zodiac Killer was going to do more podcast episodes on the Zodiac than anybody else. I'm not quite sure about that. And yes, but Planet X Filmworks had something very good about the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966, a possible Zodiac crime, and they showed some very convincing takes on the subject that Sherry Jo Bates was murdered by a right-handed perpetrator. So when you're dealing with a Zodiac killer suspect who is left-handed, say Arthur Lee Allen, then he is much lower on the totem pole of suspects, much lower on that end of the spectrum in terms of being the killer. Because yes, of course, they tried to say Arthur Lee Allen was ambidextrous, and that's what I really want to talk to you about, but his friend Glenn Reinhardt even went on the record in an article that I was reading last year about just, no, that wasn't true. What you see in the Fincher film, he was left-handed, and I want to talk about this subject because so many times you will read about a Zodiac killer suspect, and they're going to say that this person was ambidextrous. Yes, of course, they talked about Arthur Lee Allen, but so much of the Fincher film from 2007 about the Zodiac Killer is about Arthur Lee Allen being ambidextrous, and Robert Graysmith is spending like a third of the movie trying to get a handwriting sample from Arthur Lee Allen. No, not the left hand, the right hand.
no, he has two hands. How am I the only person seeing this? And they even say very clearly in the Fincher film, no one is that ambidextrous as it would be in Graysmith's theory. But I wanted to bring this up because I was working with some material on the Zodiac Killer channel for some new stuff that will be coming out in the distant future. And I was talking about the Zodiac killer suspect William Joseph Grant, one who was also explored by Robert Graysmith, author of the 1986 book Zodiac, as well as Lyndon Lafferty, who is the author of the Zodiac killer cover-up, and their theory is also that William Joseph Grant was ambidextrous. And now, the case breakers, the people who are pushing Gary Francis Post as a Zodiac killer suspect, are suggesting that Gary Francis Post was ambidextrous. And somebody wrote into the channel once saying that they thought their dad was the Zodiac killer and asked me to look at samples of his handwriting. And I'm like, okay, I'll look at samples of his handwriting. And that person said, oh, but before I send them to you, I need to let you know that he was ambidextrous, so I'm not sure which hand he was writing with. He could write with both hands. He was ambidextrous. And they didn't send the samples of the handwriting. But are all these people actually ambidextrous? I think almost certainly not. This is a case where people are fudging the facts to try and make their theory work. This is a case where people are trying to provide an explanation for something that doesn't seem to add up. It's like, let's say if somebody's fingerprints or their palm print or their writer's palm, like the side palm print, or some type of activity happening, like a witness surviving and saying that this person was right-handed. They are just trying to make excuses for themselves, so they're saying that their suspect was ambidextrous, and I mean, some people have limited abilities when they are ambidextrous, and maybe they can throw a ball or something. You see this in the MLB. It's baseball season now, and some pitchers are ambidextrous, and they can move the glove around and throw with both hands. But that doesn't mean that they can write letters with near-perfect handwriting, or even handling a knife. Yeah, okay, maybe somebody can throw a ball, but those are different muscles. Those are different parts of the hand. One deals with a lot more pressure on the joints. I mean, I really just think people are fudging the facts to try and make their suspect seem more guilty. Guiltier, excuse me. And right now I would like to get to the first question from one of you guys in the audience, and this was from Aaron Aragon, who actually sent this in on a Long Island serial killer episode, but it says, there must be some shrinks on this site. How do you guys describe the Zodiac mental outlook from his letters and penchant for killing young folks? It's important we concert our efforts now. The principles are fading away. And to be clear, I am not a shrink. I am not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a medical professional in any way. And only because it's my show, I will try to answer this one. I think that I've identified 3 voices in the Zodiac killer's letters. So how do you describe the Zodiac's mental outlook from his letters? The first one I have found is what I call the braggadocio, the person who is trying to show off, the taunting serial murderer who is saying, I like killing people because it's so much fun. This person is also acting like just like what the Bible geek said, that he's going to be reborn in paradise and those whom he has killed will be his slaves. And he's trying to show off. He said the police didn't catch me for I have been too clever. He's trying to make himself look better than everyone. That's the braggadocio. The second voice that I've identified is the sad person. The sad man. Yeah, let's go with sad man. And that is the one who says, there's this thing inside of me that can't stop. I can't stop it. I am going to kill again. And then it's even to the point where he says in some letters, when I get awfully lonely, I'll do my thing. P.S. If I don't see this note in your paper, I'll do something nasty which you know I'm capable of. You have this person who is just very sad, sounds almost depressed. No one's paying attention to him. And then the third one is the bored friend, B-O-R-E-D. The bored friend, where he's trying to be friends with people, he's sharing details because he has no one else to talk to. And that's the person who's saying that oh, I had a bus bomb, but my bus bomb turned out to be a dud. I was swamped out by the rain we had a while back. And then he is also sharing stuff about how, hey, would you like to wear some nice Zodiac buttons? Or how about wearing some not so nice Zodiac buttons? Ah, heck with it. Just wear any Zodiac buttons. Just pay attention to me, please. Please. I don't want to be ignored, and that's when it switches over to the sad man. I'm sad and lonely. No one likes me. Oh yeah, but I'm also an evil, murderous mastermind, and I'm going to have some type of godlike experience in my afterlife, and you have no one to work for you because you don't kill people. So he's jumping all over the map, and some people very easily explain this by saying that the Zodiac killer was a schizophrenic. The people who look at suspects such as Ted Kaczynski or Ross Sullivan or Richard Gaikowski, they have a schizophrenic suspect, and they just say that this is mental instability. And other people think that, oh no, the Zodiac is definitely insane, mentally ill, he's a murderer. But he's not a schizophrenic because he's completely aware of his mental faculties. It's just, he's being destructive because he thinks he can get away with it. And no matter what, this is an unsolved case. Whoever was behind this, they did get away with it. But there's someone who is boasting, there is someone who is very sad, and then there's someone who, maybe the bored friend we could call the attention seeker, but I think bored friend is another one. It's a better way of putting it because he wants to share things that he has no one else to share them with. So I guess that all ties into being a little bit lonely, and maybe just we can view the Zodiac Killer as some sad little man who wanted revenge on society for neglecting him. If you do have a single perpetrator theory, and I'm not even convinced that is, I don't have any endorsements of any theories of any kind. But, no, good question from Aaron, so thank you so much for that. And I would like to move on to the next segment here. As I said at the beginning, I appeared on Drew Beeson's channel over the weekend, on Saturday afternoon, actually, and a lot of you guys were asking some questions in the chat box that we didn't get to throughout the duration of the episode. But the first one that I would like to respond to is from Glenn Collins, who says, "Who is your favorite suspect, Ned? Always wanted to know." And about the Zodiac Killer mystery, I absolutely do not endorse any suspects, do not have a solid suspect. I do not have any theory that I am committed to or any type of belief system that I am using. And I'm going to do a much larger video about this in the future that will perhaps not be a podcast, but actually be a real video like the way I do the debunking series to tell you guys all the reasons why. But before I started BBOR, believe it or not, I actually thought highly of Louis Myers as a suspect. I thought the whole concept of how a teenager could have committed these crimes, and that's what fooled everyone because Louis Myers was 17 years old at the time. I absolutely do not think that now. Heavily abandoned that theory. And for a while, I was really curious about the idea of a group murder theory, a thrill kill club, about how one person was the central planning mind, and then 4 people went along with it, maybe 3 even, if the planning mind was the also a murderer, and that they each committed a crime of their own, almost called the 4 Horsemen theory, sometimes it's called the thrill kill club. But I was curious about that, but one point I really wanted to emphasize on the live stream that I did with Drew Beeson was that I always had to admit that a single killer could explain everything, that a single perpetrator could be the answer to all of this. But we also had the opportunity to talk all about my book, Killer on a White Horse, when I was on Drew Beeson's channel, and it's the first time that I've done any type of extended discussions on that aside from the little announcements that I have here on BBOR. And we have a comment from Patty Gimlin who says, "I hope that Ned writes a series of books about the main character in Killer on a White Horse." Oh, I could definitely do that. The next book that I'm going to be putting out is going to feature some older stories that I've written. Like, for example, back in 2010, I wrote 2 things that are both like novellas, and I'm going to put them together into a single book. But one of the original manuscripts I no longer have because it's been 12 years now. So I decided to rewrite that one from the ground up, and it's completed, just going through the editing phase, and I'm going to release those at some point. But yes, after that, absolutely I could get back to the characters in Killer on a White Horse, and as I said in the intro, that is a novel that was inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, and Sobek Lord says, yes, we need more adventures of Barry. Barry is the main character in that one. His name is Barry Albert, and then we had another comment from somebody who says, maybe also with a spin-off of Warren. Warren is Barry's best friend. His name is Warren Jones. And as far as a spin-off goes, I thought that was a really interesting comment because the reason why I chose to put those characters into the book Killer on a White Horse was I started an original novel about the two of them back in 2018, and I wrote like 10 chapters of it. Then I had absolutely no idea what to do with it. So that's just kind of resting in the archives of cyberspace somewhere. But yeah, they were the subject of an original novel, and I even alluded to that one, paid homage to it in Killer on a White Horse when I talked about how the character Barry used to be a political blogger, and he wrote this enormous expose on a senator from California, Senator Elizabeth Tong, and that's what the first novel was about. And I guess I can go ahead and give you guys some spoilers to that one because I don't know if that one will ever see the light of day. As I said, it was not a completed work or anything like that, but it was the concept of what if some dude just tries to make stuff up on the internet, and then it all turns out to be true. Like, what if he just decides to write out some wild conspiracy theory, like, oh yeah, this senator from California is actually working for the deep state and the shadow government, and what if it all turned out to be true? So that's what that first novel was about. But because I absolutely thought that was never going to come out of the shadows, I just paid homage to it in Killer on a White Horse. Now, some people have asked the question, is the protagonist in Killer on a White Horse based on me, Barry Albert? Is he inspired by me, Ned DeHaan? Some ways, definitely semi-autobiographical, but there are a lot of differences between us. Barry is half black, half white. I am not. His father's actually from Grenada and currently living in Grenada, and he had some type of twisted relationship with his mother, and he has step-siblings, which I do not have. I've never been a political blogger, and I didn't live the exact same lifestyle that he did, but I definitely had some of these solitary components of his life that I do. I mean, that was a weird way of putting it. I meant, in terms of mindset, I think we were very similar, thought process, thinking, emotional patterns. And most importantly, I also had that job. It's called Killer on a White Horse, a story of the evening watchman. I was an evening watchman, exactly the way he was. That stuff was all real. And I decided to share just what I was feeling and my current experiences at the time when I began writing that story back in 2020. But please look out for a new set of fiction in the near future, and I will be definitely getting back to the drawing board about some of the characters from Killer on a White Horse, if there is some demand for that. But we have a comment that came into the Instagram page. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram, and this is from Liquida T, who says, "Hey Ned, congrats on your recent solution to the Z32 cipher. Does it have anything to do with radians?" And the answer to that is yes. Now, I did not know this at the time, because as I said, I wasn't really familiar with the Californian geography, but the solution to the Z32 cipher that I was proposing last week, of all things, living history, if you will, but I proposed that solution that said the Zodiac's Z32 cipher reveals California North by division of vehicles, Petaluma West division, but it's really D of vehicles, so that could be department, but I think division is a better choice. And does this have anything to do with radians? Well, I was actually just looking for something completely different. I was looking just at angles and radians in something unrelated to the Z32 cipher, and I saw an image from ZodiacKillerFacts.com that was showing Gareth Penn's radians that he put on top of Mount Diablo. Gareth Penn, author of Times 17, and the person who claims that he is the one who discovered the radian theory, that if you put an angle of 57.29 degrees on top of Mount Diablo, one arm of the radian goes to Blue Rock Springs Park, and one arm of the radian goes to Presidio Heights, where Paul Stine was murdered. Two of the Zodiac's crimes, and that Lake Berryessa is going to be equidistant to Mount Diablo, as is Travis Air Force Base. And this is how Gareth Penn is getting his thought process. But when I was looking at that image on ZodiacKillerFacts.com, I saw that the radian is facing Petaluma. It is actually a body of water, and then there's Petaluma, and the solution that I came up with was Petaluma West Division. And even if my solution is wrong, this is what I want to share with you. If you just go in a straight line across the radians, from the center of the radians from Mount Diablo, and just moving in a straight line, you will pass 3 different schools. And it's not exactly on the same line, and it doesn't have to be, because the Zodiac said that when he talked about radians, he said concerns radians and inches along the radians, and the radians plural. I should have just left it at that. But there was Petaluma High School, Petaluma Junior High, and the original location that I identified, Wilson Elementary School. So all of those places are in very close proximity. So that could have some meaning, but it also could be just that my solution to the Z32 cipher was completely wrong. Even in the last episode, I said I gave it a 45% chance at best. But later on, I did find out that there is this possible connection to not only the radians, but also Gareth Penn's observation. And I think that is, surprising for me, because I was ready to dismiss Gareth Penn. Absolutely just dismiss him. And I think that I was just going to say he was wrong about everything. All of his observations were incorrect. But if it actually is about the location of a bomb that is in Petaluma, California, maybe he was onto something. And even though his radiant theory on Mount Diablo wasn't perfect, Mike Rodelli, author of In the Shadow of Mount Diablo and The Hunt for Zodiac, pointed out that if the Zodiac was actually trying to identify these places, and he's trying to commit a murder on these radians, as he says, on these radiant lines, then it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be 60 degrees or 59 degrees instead of 57.29. I mean, that makes complete sense to me. But not only Gareth Penn, but also Michael Cole talked about this. I mean, Michael Cole, I believe, is inspired by Gareth Penn's observations, that the reason why Paul Stine was murdered on October 11th of 1969 was because he was a cab driver, and the cab driver could drive to a specific location. He's one of the easiest people to drive to a specific location, and then he was murdered, and so it could line up with a type of mathematical puzzle, what I call creating the criminal masterpiece and loading it with mathematical signatures. And now I would like to get to the next comment that was written by Mr. Sean, and this was sent into the email address BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com, and he says, "Hi Ned, congratulations and thanks for all your efforts with BBOR. Personally, I have no Zodiac POI, and I am in no way trying to persuade you one way or the other. I'd love it if you could take the time to look at the attached proposed solution to the Z13 cipher by Douglas Oswell in his book, The Unabomber and the Zodiac. It's a fascinating read, even if the premise appears absurd. The book actually provides great insight and an excellent overview of the case, regardless of its central premise. I respect Oswell for not trying to convince or proselytize. He leaves it up to the reader to draw their own conclusions." And an interesting point about that is Mark Hewitt is also a believer in this Zodiac Unabomber connection, and I wrote to Mark Hewitt and I asked him about the differences between his research and Douglas Oswell's, and he said that this book here about the Unabomber and the Zodiac by Oswell is mostly about a comparison and a contrasting of the two serial killers. And just as Mr. Sean has written out, the the author is leaving it up to the reader to make the determination, but Mark Hewitt wanted to be very clear that he is directly accusing the Unabomber and of being the Zodiac killer as well, that these two murderers are one and the same. And back to Sean's comment. The biggest takeaway from the attached theory on the Z13 is whether the suspect's name appears by chance alone in words. In other words, what are the statistical odds of this man's particular name appearing? That the name of this suspect, a mathematical genius, should appear by applying a mathematical formulation, and the compelling part, the use of an understanding of an anagram notwithstanding. It could also just boil down to the fact that the words the Zodiac can be found in the man's name, and that means Theodore Kaczynski, the Unabomber, also had these letters in his name, especially the Z, very notable. An understanding of the principle of set of addition and the mathematical theory of sets is vital to following the logic of the author. Of course, I know you're an avid reader, so maybe you've already seen this. Either way, I'd love your thoughts, Sean. And he has a quote from Albert Einstein: "Pure mathematics is, in its way, the poetry of logical ideas." I love that quote from Einstein, actually. That sounds pretty cool. But I looked at the attached document, which was a section of Douglas Oswell's book, which Sean had sent me, and to answer the first question, no, I have not read The Unabomber and the Zodiac by Douglas Oswell. I followed Douglas Oswell's material a little bit, and I discussed him heavily in one episode for Zodiac Mondays. He did an episode of Shrink Wrap Radio, and I responded to that one. But as far as this solution here to the Z13 cipher, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a spoiler. The solution is from Ted Kaczynski, and there's a very strong mathematical reason why Douglas Oswell is proposing this. But as you may have heard that, I said Ted Kaczynski, not Ted Kaczynski, and it's spelled F-R-O-M from Ted, T-E-D. Kaczynski is spelled K-A-C-Z-Y-N-S-I. There's a K that has been omitted from his name. I'm always going to challenge people on this and say, all right, you're saying that it's not quite the exact spelling, but it's pretty close, right? Well, that also means you didn't get the complete spelling correctly, so that's one strike. And, okay, there's this mathematical reason that I'm not going to lie is very intricate and very complicated. But this is his solution from Ted Kaczynski. And let's read this in context in the letter. This is the Zodiac speaking. "By the way, have you cracked the last cipher I sent you? ? My name is..." And there's a dash. "My name is from Ted Kaczynski?" I don't know about that. That gives me some room for doubt. That doesn't sound like it's lining up to the actual context of the letter. Now, some people think that this "my name is" part is meant to be omitted, or that there's another meaning in there. Kelly Marshall thought that that particular dash had another clue. But "my name is from Ted Kaczynski"? I am just not feeling any warm lead on that, but always appreciating someone who is putting in some strong mental energy into their solutions. Thank you guys all for these questions. And moving onward, we have a piece of Zodiac killer news. I have to give a shout out to Andrew Gray, who sent this one in to the email address BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com, and he shared a post from Astatine211. It might be pronounced Astatine. I hope I'm getting the name right in one of those two attempts. And it says, "I found this anonymous confession letter following the hit-and-run murder of Lloyd V. Stevens in San Francisco and sent to the SFPD. There is a spelling mistake in it, mention of the gas chamber, and it was typewritten like the Sherry Joe Bates confession. Interesting coincidences." And now he said the guy's name was Lloyd Stevens, but in the article he is referred to as Lloyd Stefanso. So I'll first read the confession. And there's a segment here that was published in the newspaper that says, "SF police mailed hit-run confession, mailed on April 19th, 1957, April 19th. To whom it may concern, I was the one who hit Lloyd Stefanso on Sunday night. I had been drinking and was driving along when I saw his right in front of me. I was afraid to stop because I knew you would throw the book at me. I want to turn myself in, but I am afraid I will go to the gas chamber. I will turn myself in if you will promise to let me off, as easily as you can. Well, I don't know about a confession, but that definitely doesn't sound like one of the most honest confessions. That almost sounds like a bratty attempt at manipulation. But, I mean, if this person is indeed telling the truth, however, this is something that I think is quite different than the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, which occurred in 1966, because seems like a crime that someone would not lie about unless they actually were the one who committed this. But yes, there are numerous errors in this one, and one of the words is just completely omitted, and the word want is spelled WANVT, and bear in mind that this is on a typewriter, so someone could have edited that, and someone could have rewritten the whole thing, to be honest. It's only 2 paragraphs. But I do also admit that there's a very esoteric Zodiac piece of language, and that is the fear of the gas chamber, because 12 years later, in 1969, the Zodiac Killer is not only going to talk about this, there's that moment on the Jim Dunbar show, but then the Zodiac is going to mail in the 340 cipher, which says, "I hope you're having lots of fun trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show," which brings up an interesting point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber. So that is included there. And when I was on Drew Beeson's live stream, we were talking about the Corey Starliper solution to the 340, and I think, well, perhaps everyone who had looked at both solutions, David Oranchak's and Corey Starliper's, they noticed that Corey Starliper was a guy who several years ago tried to solve the 340, and he didn't quite get it. But he got the words gas chamber in almost the correct place, which is really quite shocking. It could be an absolute coincidence, but maybe he did indeed solve that portion of it, or whatever metric Corey Starliper was using actually turned out to give him 2 of the correct words. I have a couple episodes about him on this channel, or he's mentioned in a few of the episodes where I talk about the 340, if anyone would like to hear more about Corey Starliper's solution. But of course, I endorse David Oranchak's, as well as Jarl Van Eyck and Sam Blake. But the article for the death of Lloyd Stefanso has been posted here, and it says, San Francisco police late yesterday received an anonymous letter purportedly from the hit-and-run killer, in which the writer confessed to the crime and said that he wanted to surrender. Well, as you guys just heard there, he wants to surrender as long as he can get off easily. I mean, that's kind of pathetic, to be honest. The postmark on the envelope showed that the letter had been cleared through the Allington Way and the Milvia office at Berkeley at 9:30 p.m. on Friday. And interestingly, the authorities responded by saying, "This is not first-degree murder. He need not be afraid of the gas chamber." I'm glad they said that, because when I first read those lines of the confession, I was like, would he really even have a chance at going to the gas chamber or getting the death penalty for something like that? And again, though, why would somebody write a hoax letter about a crime such as a hit and run and also admit that they were drunk driving if they didn't actually do it? There's nothing really to brag and boast about. I mean, it's not like someone is trying to make themselves out to be some type of cruel, horrible badass. No, they're openly admitting in the letter that it was an accident, as opposed to, let's say hypothetically, if somebody were to take credit for the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. Okay, that person is, in their own demented way, trying to make themselves look tough and strong, and they're not, absolutely not, horribly illegal, but Sherry Jo Bates was stabbed dozens of times. She was injured. She's fighting for her life. She's pulling out pieces of the perpetrator's hair. There is some type of confrontation going on, and ultimately she was murdered. I repeat, that is not cool. That doesn't make you tough. That doesn't make you badass. But perhaps if someone were to write a hoax letter, they would be thinking that. Their thought process, taking credit for a mistake that was committed while drunk driving, I don't know about that. That seems like an odd thing to hoax about. And the police called a press conference, and then they decided to publish as an appeal to the letter writer to give himself up once more. Later appeals were made by radio and television. And I guess that's all they really could do, but I I really wonder, though, like, what would be the objective of sending this in? Is this just somebody who maybe actually did commit the crime, these drunk driving hit and run, but he did not want to get any jail time at all, so he didn't want to hold on to the dark secret because he thought it would destroy him, so he decided to confess in this little message here? I mean, that's possible, but certainly I do not know. And but also, to verify authenticity, someone has now sent in a letter, and even if they weren't the actual perpetrator, the final line of the article is, "It was examined for fingerprints," Moody said, "and a good print at one finger was found." Okay, so no matter what, someone would have incriminated themselves even if they had not actually sent in even if they hadn't actually committed the crime, they've incriminated themselves. So my ultimate verdict on this one would be this is an authentic confession. Like, say, for example, some people think the Zodiac killer was confessing to crimes that he didn't commit. I'm sure that happened at some point. The whole thing, I have now killed 12 people to date. I'm not quite so sure about that. And some people even think that the author of the Sherry Joe Bates Riverside Confession was not the actual killer. I also, well, I mean, I simply don't know that with that one. That's an unsolved case. But with this one here, the murder of Lloyd Stefanso, which is a hit and run, and by the letter writer's own admission, he was driving drunk and it was an accident. I'll read the confession one more time. "To whom it may concern, I was the one who hit Lloyd Stefanso on Sunday night. I had been drinking and was driving along when I saw him right in front of me. I was afraid to stop because I know you would throw the book at me. I want to turn myself in, but I'm afraid I'll go to the gas chamber. I will turn myself in if you promise to let me off as easily as you can." I mean, yeah, that seems like somebody who just didn't want to hold on to a dark secret, but it's quite odd that he would mail in the letter so anonymously because it's definitely not going to help him in any way. And as I said, he left a fingerprint behind, so it's almost like he's making additional trouble for himself. But yes, I do think that this was the real perpetrator. But I'm not noticing any particular malicious intent with the crime. I mean, there is the possibility that it was intentional, actually. It says, "I was the one who hit Lloyd Stefanso on Sunday night. I had been drinking and driving when I saw him right in front of me." Now, does that sound like he didn't yield or didn't break, or he intentionally hit him and then in some type of impulsive moment? I think that could be interpreted in both ways. However, I think we simply will not know. But no matter what, rest in peace to Lloyd, and he definitely became the victim of some very tragic circumstances. And thank you once again to Andrew Gray for sharing that piece with me. And much like the previous weeks, with these Zodiac reports, I totally don't mind sticking around and chatting with you guys for a little bit. And we had one comment that came in on a Long Island serial killer episode. As I said, that series has now been restarted, and you can tune in every Wednesday for a new episode about the Long Island serial killer and the stories of the victims. And I need to reinforce one point. I do think there's a certain valuable element in telling the story through the victims as the center point, and that's really what the Long Island serial killer mystery is, because with the Zodiac killer, like many people, I went through the suspect list first, and I was looking at all these different suspects. Could this person have been the serial killer that was operating in the Bay Area in the 1960s? But with the Long Island serial killer, it becomes about who was this victim, who was this person, what was her life like, and you learn more about the innocent people as opposed to the guilty parties. But someone left a comment responding to a very brief thing I said in the Long Island serial killer episode that came out last Wednesday about the anthrax killer. And this person says Bruce Ivans was innocent. And her name is Debbie Zopina. Just giving a shout out to you, Debbie. And yeah, I did talk briefly about the anthrax killer. Now, Bruce Ivans was the prime suspect in the anthrax killer case. However, he was not convicted for it. He committed suicide before they were able to do so, but they were zeroing in on him. And if you would like to see a dramatization of this, you can watch the Hot Zone Anthrax. Season 2 of the Hot Zone is called just that, the Hot Zone Anthrax. and it features Daniel Day Kim, and he plays the detective, the FBI agent, who's trying to track down the anthrax killer, and they're zeroing in on Bruce Ivans. And if you are someone who is curious about the human thought process, the Hot Zone Anthrax really shows somebody's descent into madness. But was Bruce Ivans actually guilty? Did he actually commit those crimes? Well, he definitely was dealing with issues of mental instability. He definitely had the psychological profile for that, and there's definitely even a motive, such as he was someone who was a scientist, microbiologist, worked on an anthrax vaccine, and in 2001 we had the September 11th terrorist attacks, and that, of course, was the biggest headline all throughout the world, even, definitely throughout America. I remember after 9/11, the morning papers that came out just devoted the entire front page above the fold to 3 words, terror strikes home. And, I mean, that's just what they were, 3 words. There wasn't even an article. And it was definitely the biggest news story of my lifetime. But not only that, 9/11 was also the biggest mass murder in the history of our country. Rest in peace to the fallen. Absolutely terrible and tragic event. But about Bruce Ivans, he thought, allegedly, that his work with the anthrax vaccine was no longer going to get any recognition, and that he sent in these anthrax letters that are threatening people, trying to pass himself off as a terrorist, so that anthrax would be back in the news, and then some way, somehow, he is going to get recognition, notoriety, and achievements for being involved with the anthrax vaccine. However, is that really what happened? That's a theory. That's a theory that some people have, that there was this mentally unstable guy that just wanted people to like him, and he wanted his moment in the sun. He wanted his spotlight moment, for lack of a better term. The counter-arguments to Bruce Ivans being the anthrax killer are rather fascinating. I have 3 episodes about him here on this channel, if anybody would like to hear more. And not only that, but I also did an episode where I compared and contrasted the anthrax killer and the Unabomber. It's one of those psychological breakdown episodes. But the counter-arguments are that he simply did not have access to the types of anthrax that were used in the letters. It's like, alright, you think that he had problems with mental instability, you think that he wanted to turn himself into some type of showboat. Okay, I mean, you're looking at his childhood and looking at all these reasons why he would have done this, but the simple response is, they're saying, no, the anthrax that was used in his lab was different. He didn't have access to the kinds that were sent in the letters, and how would he have done it? And I was really surprised, though, that Wikipedia, of all places, bought into the anthrax conspiracy, that Bruce Ivans was innocent the way that Debbie has said. Now, I simply don't know. I think there's a very high chance, though, that Bruce Ivans was guilty, and I haven't seen anything immediately, to my satisfaction, that would rule him out as a participant, or rule him out as the anthrax killer. Yeah, okay, some people are posting this stuff on Wikipedia, and they have their reasons, they have their sources. However, I mean, with any type of conspiracy theory, you need the proof first. Like, if you can provide compelling evidence or proof of your claim, yeah, I will accept it. I just don't think it's there yet. And on this channel, I frequently refer to Bruce Ivans as the anthrax killer, but I think that the majority of America is in the same boat as well. And we have another comment that came in from CY0031, and CY says, something about Charles Manson and a motive for the Tate LaBianca murders. Why did those crimes actually happen? Why was Sharon Tate murdered as well as everyone else? CY says, the Manson drug deal gone bad is the only thing that makes any sense. It explains the torture of Sharon Tate in front of Jay Sebring. The name Jay gave up was LaBianca. This explains why Sharon didn't want her sister and her friends in the house that night, which her sister always said in interviews was strange. Was it a drug deal going down, or some other funky thing? Now, the first immediate response is, I don't know about the only motive for the Tate LaBianca murders being a drug deal gone wrong. I definitely tend to be on the same page with Tom O'Neill, author of the book Chaos, when he says, it's possible, I mean, that could have happened, but it's not certain, because when I was responding to Stephanie Harlow's videos on the Manson family, and I have 6 episodes now about that, and there's a 6-part playlist here on this channel if anyone would like to hear, but Susan Atkins, a member of the Manson family who was there when Sharon Tate was murdered, said very clearly that the motive for the Tate LaBianca murders was that they wanted to commit a crime that would shock the world. And I think that that is perhaps, and I mean, that's just as equally up there, that there is the conventional motive that Charles Manson was somebody who is viewed as a cult leader. He is viewed as someone who was some type of hypnotic enchanter who put all these people under his spell. And what he really wanted, though, was not to be a cult leader. He wanted to be a musician, and he wanted to have a large record deal, and he wanted the world to hear his music, and he wanted to be somebody like the Beatles, except without 3 other people behind him. And that was the motive. And then he realized that it wasn't going to happen, and he wanted revenge on not only a single person, but just on the media elites of America, because he was opposed to them, and because he realized that his music career was never going to take off. They wanted to commit a crime that would shock the world. I absolutely do not believe that it was about driving fear into the heart of Terry Melcher, the guy who used to live in the house, but did not live there at the time, because I just think that that doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense. But simply, it was a house that they were familiar with, that Manson had been to before, that Tex Watson had even driven up to, the guy who actually participated in all of the murders. And then there was something about obtaining a black phone book that had all of the names of the music industry. That's that thing about how Lino LaBianca was in possession of the black phone book, because you have the Sharon Tate murders on one night and the LaBianca murders on the next night. And did they just want to commit a crime that would shock the world out of revenge? And one of the more conventional lines about Charles Manson is that he thought that he was going to get away with it by ordering other people to do it. And he even talked about this somewhat in the interview that he did with a French journalist. It was a French language documentary with subtitles, interview rather than a documentary, excuse me. And the interviewer is even asking him, "But you were the mind. You were the one who told people what to do." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I was the mind. I was the mastermind. I should be in jail because I told somebody to do something." And is it possible at all that Charles Manson just said something to the effect of, "Okay, go to that house and do whatever you feel is right. Go to that house and take care of business. Go to that house and show them what you got," or something like that, in his own talking in circles, roundabout, sing-song way. I am absolutely not convinced that the drug deal gone wrong is the only theory out there. Some people have put together some rather compelling narratives, which I explored in my episode 5, the one I did about 2 weeks ago, where it was called Charles Manson and the Tate LaBianca murders thanks to Stephanie Harlow. It's a direct response to the content on her channel, and you can always listen to her more detailed versions. The final episode on Stephanie Harlow's channel was about an hour and a half, and very, very lengthy episode. She has 6 of them now, plus the bonus one, so really it's 7. But lastly, I would like to leave you with some things about The Girl from Plainville. I was talking about that series last week, as well as the story of Alexander Urtula and In Young Yu. Alexander Urtula was the guy who committed suicide while his girlfriend was present, and the courts believed that her verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse were actually responsible for his death, and she was charged with involuntary manslaughter in Young Yu, and she was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, but it was called a suspended sentence, and that meant that she wouldn't serve the jail time as long as she adhered to the conditions of her probation. Probation was for 10 years. But I've been following the show The Girl from Plainville on Hulu, and they also had an episode of 2020 called Words to Die By, which is about a very similar story which occurred before In Young Yu and Alexander Urtula, and that's the story of Conrad Roy and Michelle Carter. And The 2020 episode pretty much gave away all the spoilers for the show, but because it is a real true crime case, it's also these are dealing with facts, and they're just trying to present the narrative. It's interesting, though, that none of the family members were consulted for the Hulu series on either side, and I really don't know why they would choose to do that. I mean, they probably could have done a much better program unless they wanted to go with some type of dramatization. But yes, it's about two teenagers named Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy, and some way, somehow, there is this type of psychological shift that happens where these two teenagers are in a long distance relationship, which is mostly text based, as well as phone calls. I think they said in the 2020 episode that they only actually met up 4 times, even though they lived about an hour apart, but throughout a year they only met up 4 times, and they didn't have a lot of physical interaction. However, at some point in the relationship, Michelle Carter began to express herself in a very negative way, in a very abusive way, and started encouraging her boyfriend to commit suicide. And because the show The Girl from Plainville, I repeat, the dramatization, is released weekly, can't binge watch the whole thing, I thought that that fictional show was going to have something where she was going to talk him into suicide because she was obsessed with the television show Glee, and she wanted to do something like Leah Michelle's character is going to give a tribute to Corey Monteith's character, who did indeed pass away, and that she was just trying to act out some type of television fantasy. That would be an actual case of unable to differentiate between fantasy and reality. And when I was watching the 2020 special, The Words to Die By, they didn't give a very clear motive as to why Michelle Carter would have talked her boyfriend into suicide, but on The Girl from Plainville, they have now backed away from that whole acting out the TV show fantasy angle, and instead they are trying to present it as Michelle Carter was a closeted homosexual, and she wanted her boyfriend to commit suicide because she thought that she would get attention from a female admirer, or a girl that she was actually admiring, someone whom she wanted to be in a relationship with. But as I said, closeted homosexual, and the other girl is also not not either not out to her parents, or she is just simply not a homosexual at all. We really aren't quite sure based on everything that has been shared, and she's denying it completely. So I think that maybe they didn't contact the family just so they could add in certain elements like that. What happened with the real life Michelle Carter seems to be rather left out of some of the news coverage, but Michelle Carter was found guilty, not of involuntary manslaughter like in Young You, the real life Michelle Carter, that is. It was wanton and reckless conduct, and she did a year and a half in prison for that. But there were some very particular circumstances around the death of Conrad Roy, and that is that he committed suicide by sitting in his truck overnight, and he had a type of generator that was started, and it's like carbon monoxide poisoning, and that's how he chose to commit suicide. But throughout the whole ordeal, he is texting his girlfriend Michelle Carter, and she is instructing him on what to do and telling him, even at one point, that he needs to do it soon because she can't be up too late, which is absolutely horrible and sickening, talking about a human life that way. But at one point, Conrad Roy backs out of it and says that he just doesn't want to do it. He gets out of the truck, and Michelle Carter orders him to get back in the truck, or she tells him to do it, and he does, and he listens to that command. He abides by it. And that's why the judge found that she should be guilty of wanton and reckless conduct, because we live in the United States of America, right? We have the First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech. And the defense team is just simply trying to play the freedom of speech angle. They're trying to say that this is a case where somebody was not present during the time of death. How could they be responsible for anything to do with this person's death if it's all done by phone? And the judge's ruling, I think, was very simple, that the parts of speech that are not free, that are not protected, are ones that deal with immediate calls to action regarding violence against other people or harm to other people. Like, I mean, there are all types of limitations on freedom of speech. You can't threaten people, you can't perjure people, you can't blackmail people. And someone even sent me an article about the HIPAA Act that says employers cannot say certain things to people. Like, an employer cannot say something about somebody's medical condition publicly. It's of the Health Insurance Privacy Act, and there are all types of limitations on what type of language can be used. But the judge found that because she had instructed him to get back into the truck and to continue with this plan of suicide, that was a call to immediate violence that led to his death. Or that was a call to immediate action, rather, that led to his death. And that's absolutely correct. And I don't think anybody was denying that. It's just, was that actually warranting her to be found guilty of the crime? Because, as I said, where do you draw the lines on what speech is protected and what is not? But she was found guilty of wanton and reckless conduct, and I have to agree. I mean, based on the nature of their exchanges, and she's openly telling him to kill himself over a period of few months, and I need to be very clear, there is the real-life Michelle Carter and the fictionalized version of her on The Girl from Plainville. The motive for the real-life Michelle Carter to do so, I have no idea. All the motives that I shared in this episode were about the dramatization on The Girl from Plainville. And I said I would end the episode with a request from the Bible group, which was asking the question, what was I like back in high school? And more precisely, it was talking about the sense of humor that I had, and how I would watch a lot of independent movies. I would listen to very obscure music found in corners of the internet, as well as just learning about all types of things that people weren't familiar with, whether it's books or comic strips. And I would use those humorous elements in conversation and in my daily life, and people simply didn't get the references, and they also didn't know what I was talking about, because I'm just citing something or acting out a behavior from something, whether it's an independent film or it's a sitcom from BBC America that nobody else at school was watching. And the request from the Bible group was, what were some of the things that you did back in high school that people didn't understand? And the Bible group asked once, and I responded that it won't really make a lot of sense without the context, but I got a second request to go ahead and try anyway. And I became a very big fan of stand-up comedy when I was 14, and I even look forward to Friday night stand-up on Comedy Central, because it's not only that the people are very funny, right? It was also just about how there is just one person and a microphone. Sometimes there's a bar stool and a cup of water sitting there, and just that's it. That's the performance. And that's how this person is entertaining you and making you laugh. I've always had a big connection to minimalism, hence BlackBoxOnlineRadio when I started the channel, and there was just a black box on the screen. But there's a reason for that. It's really about the ideas as opposed to just the flashy effects. But one day I'm going to learn how to make flashy effects. So I would listen to a lot of stand-up comedy and watch it on Comedy Central every Friday, and I became a fan of the comedy group Stella, which featured Michael Ian Black, Michael Showalter, and David Wayne, and they eventually got their own show, which only lasted for a little bit, but the tagline was, Stella is the name of their comedy troupe, but it's dumb comedy dressed up in a suit. And it's a lot of things that are just about awkward situations and such, and bizarre behavior. And as I said, two of the characters are named Michael, and one is named David. And then at one point, I believe it's David Wayne just shouts out, well, F you, Michael. This is the end of the episode, I can swear. Well, fuck you, Michael. And I would say that to people from time to time, even if the guy's name wasn't Michael or something, if there was just like a misunderstanding, I would just say, well, F you, Michael. And people are like, what, why is he doing this? Like, I mean, my name isn't Michael. And it's a reference to the show Stella, or the stand-up comedy performances by them. And it had meaning to me, But if you hadn't seen that exact piece of videography, it wouldn't really make any sense to you. But I kept doing those things. And for years, I mean, high school all the way through college. And when I was a junior in college, I discovered mostoffensivevideo.com because of YouTube, actually. But they're the guys, mostly it's one guy, who redid the Charlie Brown series, like the Peanuts cartoon with Charlie Brown and Linus and Lucy, and they redid them with this storyline about how all the characters are now African Americans living the hood life. And there's a lot of things that I won't even say because they are, well, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to use those words, but I would reference those cartoons, which nobody else ever saw except me in my social circles, and just say something like, "Take a ride on the fantastic voyage, Sodom and gonorrhea." I don't even know what that means or something. I had to Google all of that stuff, and I was like, I think the Fantastic Voyage, I Googled that once, was, I think it's a reference to a Jay-Z song, but Sodom and gonorrhea, I can guess what that is, but I don't actually know. It turns out, though, if you actually do watch those things, they're just like, oh, let's see, what's one that doesn't have the N-word in it? Oh, Suck My Big Black Ass, Charlie Brown. That's still available here on YouTube. I might say a few curse words from time to time, but I'm not saying the N-word. You see, even I have that level of social awareness. But the whole point is that humor is heavily connected to likability. If I ever just write out like all the life lessons that I've learned and give it away as a free ebook, that is going to be in there. Humor is heavily connected to likability, and it's best to try and develop some type of rapport or understanding with people before you try and be funny, because often I would enter into a social group, whether usually it's coworkers, and the coworkers are like talking and laughing, and some of them might even say things that are pushing the envelope a little bit with humor, and they're telling like far out jokes or something that's with some type of controversial material. And usually for the first couple weeks or months of working with them, I would be really quiet. And then after 2 or 3 weeks or maybe a month, I would definitely become a little bit more talkative because I'm more familiar with them. And I would start participating in that rough edge type of humor, and then they'd just be shocked that I would do it. Oh, what? No, you can't say that. And there are two responses. The first is, I was probably wrong for doing that because, as some person pointed out, that I really wasn't trying to be funny. I was just always taking it one step further. That's what she said to me, a coworker, that, see, no matter what happens, you have to take it one step further. And I think she meant that you're just saying something that is more extreme than what the last person said, and that is how you can get into trouble. Doing things to fuel your own excitement. Because I definitely stand by what the comedian Jim Norton said. If the intention is only to be funny, anything is fair game. But if you're just doing something to fuel your own excitement, then the intention isn't only to be funny. You're not just trying to make people laugh and share something comedic. You're just being awkward because it releases neurotransmitters in the brain that stimulate you in a certain way, and you aren't caring about how other people feel. But back to the point about likability and humor, if people don't like you, they aren't going to find your jokes funny, or they're going to think that you're just being somewhat intrusive into their zone. And maybe you have a right to participate in things if they are doing it. Maybe not. I really think it's a case-by-case basis. But if you're just trying to be funny, then definitely establish the rapport. Be aware that humor and likability are connected. And at this point in life now, though, like, if somebody were to get on my case about that, if they were to tell jokes in a certain way, but if I were to tell similar jokes and they wouldn't like it, it's like, hey, you shouldn't say that. Yeah, but you did 5 minutes ago. Oh yeah, well that was different. I probably wouldn't interact with that person. But I did have a coworker once who would just kind of get really angry at people for very unexpected reasons. And then, like, you'll just be saying something and she'd be like, yeah, well, fine! Just something like that. And, she would just walk away. And sometimes, like, she would make silly faces while she was doing it. And one time we went out as coworkers after work one night, and, there were some of us that were sitting in a bar. I don't drink alcohol, I was drinking Red Bull. And she, just started doing that, like, oh yeah, well, fine. And we just decided to ask her, hey, why do you do that? It just, people are just talking, and then all of a sudden you're saying something like in an angry voice, and then you just walk away. Why do you do that? And she said, well, that's my sense of humor. And I was shocked when I heard that. Right, when it's somebody else, right, it's shocking, right? I was like, you mean you just do bizarre and confusing things, and you think you have the right to do that because you're trying to pass it off as humor, and you're just being weird so you can entertain yourself? And I was like, oh my gosh, I get it now. I get why people had such a problem with my behavior, or why some people will, well, why they responded to me the way they did, for just those reasons. That you're just being weird and awkward to fuel your own excitement, and you're not paying attention or caring about how it affects other people. The whole concept of, if somebody gets mad about my behavior, well, that's their fault, and they shouldn't be mad because I have the right to do this. Yeah, of course you have the right to do that, but does that mean that you should just completely disregard the well-being of other people? No, and since then I've learned other things. I mean, that was all mostly 8 or 10 years ago. I think it was 8 years ago, actually. But the whole takeaway from that is I ended up reading the book The Dream of Mortal Life, which talks about how it's a true mystery of humanity. How do you maintain the balance? Your right to individuality and your responsibility to contribute to the collective well-being. Because when I was younger, and the way that other coworker was acting was, we're only focused on our right to individuality. I'm doing something because it fuels my own excitement. It doesn't even make you feel happy. It fuels your own excitement. You're just overwhelmed by the dopamine surges in your brain that come from being weird. And in many ways, we know that it's just being weird and being awkward and being silly. And I mean, being weird is not a crime, but it definitely won't make you friends all the time. You definitely won't have friends all the time if you're just going to say, no, I'm just going to do whatever I want, and then other people can accept it or reject it. Well, the whole point of why I'm telling you this is I just did whatever I wanted. I said it was just my sense of humor. I had the right to behave this way, and everybody rejected it. But the fact is, they were my coworkers. I still had to work with them. Or maybe if you have roommates or something, and you have like an apartment together and a lease together, then they reject it, but you still have to live with them, and you can't just walk away immediately. Of course, with a roommate, there would be some steps you could do to get out of that, or coworkers, you could change your job, but sometimes you can't. Life is complicated. So, I mean, those are just some examples of the awkward behavior that I experienced, and one story that I shared from somebody else. But if anybody else would like to weigh in the comment section down below, I would invite you to do so. Anybody can rate the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram. So I will see you guys over there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.